And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? It is Monday, June 19th, 2023. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Got a couple of episodes to get into for you guys today. Lots of big Oregon football recruiting updates, specifically as it pertains to the 2024 recruiting class. So make sure you guys stay tuned in for both episodes because they are both very big updates for Dan Lanning and the Ducks here in the 2024 class. But before we get into today's episode, do me a little favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons for me. Whether you're watching on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres or listening on your podcasting platform of choice, likes, comments, subscribes, all help me out tremendously. And I love seeing the support from you guys, doing the best job that I possibly can to give you guys the best Oregon football recruiting coverage that you will find. So I'm on the road right now. I'm in beautiful Spokane, Washington, up here for a buddy's wedding from college. And as a lot of you guys know, I went to Gonzaga University. So go Zags. And back up in the Northwest. Definitely miss it living out in Southern California now, but kind of a weird podcasting setup for today. So I'm actually not going to be on screen for these two episodes, but you can still listen to me on YouTube. So just wanted to have that little note out there. But with that being said, let's start off today's episode of the podcast. First story of the day, since we last talked, 2024 safety Kingston Lopa has committed to the Oregon Ducks. He plays his high school football in Sacramento, California at Grant Union High School, and this is a big pickup for the Ducks at the safety position. Looking at his 247 Sports recruiting profile, he's listed at 6'5", 190 pounds. So definitely a lengthy defensive back. On Twitter, he lists himself at 6'4", 195. I've seen and heard other people say that he's listed at 6'3" on some other websites. So we'll have to verify that, but 6'5", 190, we'll work with that right now. He's going to be a Duck. Kingston Lopa will be going from Northern California to Eugene to play his college football, and we're going to be breaking down all the layers in this commitment, right? Because there's impacts in the safety room, there's impacts at other positions, so much to get into. I think the first thing that we want to get into here that is definitely worth noting is that Kingston Lopa wasn't always on that fast track to become a Duck. He was previously committed to the University of Arizona and announced that he would be reopening his recruitment on April 5th. So just a couple of short months later, and Kingston Lopa is now in the fold for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks here in the class of 2024. Kingston Lopa chose the Ducks from a number of other big time offers. He had 18 reported scholarship offers according to his 247 Sports recruiting profile. Obviously, you have some Pac-12 schools in the mix here with Arizona. You also had Washington, where he was reportedly scheduled to take an official visit out to Washington, get out to Seattle onto Mont Lake to see Kalen DeBoer and the Huskies, but pretty obvious that he's not going to be taking that official now because he's committed to Oregon. But a couple other schools that were on the table, you had LSU, you had Auburn, Michigan, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Tennessee, USC. So it wasn't just Oregon that was in the mix here for Kingston Lopa, the newest defensive back in Chris Hampton's safety room. I think another thing that's worth mentioning here with Kingston Lopa and kind of what makes him special, right? We talked about the size, 6'5", 190 pounds. You don't see a lot of safeties at that size. Oregon is an exception, one of a few exceptions because they have Brian Addison on the roster, and he's right around that 6'5" range. And he was probably the most productive safety that the Ducks had in their secondary last year. Came to Oregon as one of the country's top athletes, originally committed to UCLA, coming out of Gardena Serra, where the Ducks signed Roderick Pleasant, but he played some receiver, then he found a home in the safety room, So I think I still need to do a little bit of digging. I wouldn't be surprised if Kingston Lopa maybe ended up coming down and playing in the front seven, maybe as a linebacker, because watching some of the tape for this guy, I tweeted it out after he committed. This guy can hit. That is very, very apparent, and that's definitely the kind of physicality, the brand of football that Dan Lanning wants to be playing on defense and really across his entire team, but particularly on defense. So I would definitely think it's worth looking at the possibility of maybe him changing positions because you don't see a lot of safeties with that length playing that spot. All that said, maybe the staff views this as a guy who does have a seriously unique build and skill set. So maybe he ends up staying as a safety. Also plays some wide receiver for Grant Union. But let's look at what this commitment means for Oregon. I think that's obviously what we have to look at here. He's the second safety to commit to Oregon here in the 2024 class, joining Aaron Flowers out of Forney, Texas. He's a 4-star All-American caliber guy, Flowers is, but that could very well wind up being Oregon's safety haul here in the 2024 class. So another safety, another defensive back, and we're seeing this 2024 Oregon secondary really starting to take shape under new safeties coach Chris Hampton, who comes over from Tulane. Quickly got Aaron Flowers in the fold, also landed a commitment from Tyseer Johnson. So important to look at the other factors and the other guys that Chris Hampton has been able to land in just the short amount of time that he's been on staff in Eugene. And then you also have Ife Obadegwu, an All-American caliber cornerback out of Baltimore, Maryland, St. Francis Academy, one of two commits from St. Francis for the Ducks, along with quarterback Michael Van Buren here in the 2024 class. So that's three defensive backs that are in the fold for Dan Lanning and the Ducks in 2024. And I think that corner is a spot they're going to be much more selective at, just because they hit that position so heavily in previous cycles. That's kind of what I've been telling you guys. Definitely not the best developments recently with Dakota Fields pledging to USC. I told you guys that I thought that the Oregon pick made a lot of sense, but I never felt confident enough to put in a prediction for that. And then, of course, he ended up at USC. But we're definitely seeing some movement there. I think Chris Johnson, the second out of Aledo, Texas, is another guy to watch. Aaron Scott Jr. Is another one out of the state of Ohio. Bryce West had previously put Oregon as another corner out of Ohio. In case you guys don't know, he put Oregon in his top schools, and then now it's looking like he's reportedly down to Ohio State and Michigan. So a heated rivalry carries it onto the recruiting trail. But we're trying to track those updates, those other names that you need to be watching for Oregon here in the 2024 class. I think I really like this Kingston Lopa pickup. Part of me also thinks that it might have been a little reactionary. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean that there were, some really top-notch guys that Oregon was going after at the safety spot. And, long story short, they ended up at other schools. So, Oregon probably wanted to take a safety and then get someone else in the fold. And, Kingston Lopa was on an official visit this past weekend when he chose to make his decision. So I think that could have played into part of it. But I'm just trying to look at other safeties that the Ducks were going after. You have Xavier Filsaime out of McKinney, Texas. He committed to Florida not too long ago and then just recently shut down his recruitment. You have KJ Bolden out of Buford, Georgia. I think Oregon's still in the mix there, but he looks like he's on a fast track to UGA to play for Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs in Athens. Peyton Woodyard. Peyton Woodyard's another safety. He's committed to Georgia right now out of Bellflower, California, St. John Bosco, one of the best defensive backs in the nation. I've been telling you guys to keep an eye out for Oregon in that one, but I think, recent developments, you see kind of what happens. I think that if he doesn't end up staying at Georgia, I could absolutely see him going to play for USC and Lincoln Riley, seeing that staff, that recruiting staff is prioritizing, the LA area. And Peyton Woodyard, even though Oregon has a good connection with him, strong relationships, the whole nine, I think that after taking that official visit to USC, that weekend he got to meet Troy Polamalu. You got to keep an eye out there for Peyton Woodyard and the Trojans. So all that being said, then you also have Jalen McClain, a safety out of New Jersey. He committed to Ohio State. The Ducks really wanted him, but Ohio State was always the biggest threat there. And then you also have Marquise Gallegos out of Chaminade High School in West Hills, California, my neck of the woods, Southern California. He has Oregon in his top schools and will be taking an official visit to Oregon, I think next weekend. But I don't think that Oregon is necessarily in a great spot with Marquise Gallegos. I think that he has USC written all over him, and he's another SoCal guy. But he's working from a top 5 right now of USC, Oregon, Michigan, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. And he's announcing his commitment on June 27th, which is right after he heads to Oregon for his last official visit. And he just visited USC this past weekend. So I'm not trying to talk about USC a whole lot here, but as you guys know, if you've been following recruiting for any period of time with the Ducks and with myself, there's so much overlap between Oregon and USC. So I'm just trying to kind of fill you guys in on what other guys Oregon's going after at safety and, who else we could see, maybe hop in or go to other schools, whatever it is. But end of the day, I think that, what I'm trying to tell you is that I don't think that Oregon probably felt super great about a lot of their top targets at safety. I'm not trying to take anything away from this Kingston Lopa commitment at all. I'm just kind of trying to read between the lines and kind of give my 2 cents on how I think this one probably unfolded. So with Kingston Lopa in the fold now, long, rangy, physical defensive back, guy who flies to the ball, has great reach and closing speed. Now that you have him in the fold, Oregon is up to the number 8 class in the country, according to the 247 Sports ratings. They have what number class? Let's see. I'm pulling this up on the fly here, so give me a second. 16 total commitments, and they're the number 8 class in the country, number 1 class in the Pac-12 right now. And guess who has the number 2 class coming in at number 9? None other than the Stanford Cardinal. And, I got to give a shout out to Stanford and Troy Taylor, because it looks like he has breathed new life into that program out on the farm in Palo Alto in the Bay Area. He has breathed new life into that program, at least from a recruiting standpoint. They have undeniable momentum right now, landing a number of really impressive commitments. I think the biggest one is the new headliner, Elijah Brown, quarterback out of Santa Ana, California, modern day, one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks still on the board at the time of his commitment. I saw Brown all week at the Elite 11 in Redondo Beach. And he was, he did his thing. He's a good quarterback. I don't think that he is as physically impressive or as athletic as some other quarterbacks that you'll find, but a massive, massive pickup from a national powerhouse program for Troy Taylor. Love that fit as the Cardinal get a recruiting win over the UCLA Bruins. So I got a little bit off of a sidetrack there, but we like to sprinkle in some Pac-12 updates as well here on the Ducks Dish podcast. So we know we'll get back to Oregon before too long. So Ducks, number 8 class in the country, 16 verbal commitments. 11 of those commitments are 4 stars with 5 3-stars in the mix for an average commit rating of 90.42. And then this is also, we got to make a mention here. This is also some great momentum for the Ducks on the recruiting trail at a really important time on the recruiting trail and the recruiting calendar, I should say, as they're set to host their biggest official visit weekend of the month of June next weekend, June 23rd. Have all sorts of huge names coming to campus. You have Michael Van Buren, quarterback commit for the Ducks, Jordan Anderson, wide receiver commit for the Ducks, Kamar Matudi, a top linebacker target for Oregon. He's going to be in town, just to name a few. So this is a big weekend that they're going to be looking to close with some of their top guys. So important to continue building that momentum on the recruiting trail. And then the second straight week with another commitment for Oregon, as Devin Brooks, Clackamas interior offensive lineman, committed to Oregon last weekend. So Kingston Lopa is in the fold for Oregon. Will play his college football in Eugene. Another high upside pickup for Chris Hampton and the Ducks here. Like I talked about, Chris Hampton's making a name for himself as a recruiter. Safety spot is definitely a tough one to recruit, at least when you're looking at the options that they had closer to home on the West Coast. Tried to make some noise in Texas, but you can't land everybody. And then you're also going to have the transfer portal to look to. So Kingston Lopa is in the fold. He's going to be a Duck. Ducks have the number 8 recruiting class in 2024 as they stay hot on the recruiting trail heading into the most important weekend of the month. rolling right along here on the Ducks Dish podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of your go-to Oregon football recruiting podcast. Like I said, I'm your host, Max Torres, on the road in Spokane, Washington. If you guys are watching me on YouTube, drop a like and comment. Let me know how you're feeling about Oregon football recruiting right now. And subscribe to the channel as well. So our second episode of the day, we just talked about Kingston Lopa, 2024 Sacramento area safety committing to Oregon. That's good news, but we got to talk about some not so great news for Dan Lanning and the Ducks on the recruiting trail. Over the weekend, 2024 Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Roman Catholic, Oregon wide receiver commit Tyseer Denmark reopened his recruitment, I should say, decommitted from the Ducks. This was first reported by Adam Friedman of the Rivals Network. I was able to reach out to Tyseer Denmark's head coach at Roman Catholic and confirm that he had decommitted from the Ducks. Worth noting that he didn't put anything out on his own social media platforms that I saw. But important to have those connections and be able to verify those developments on the recruiting trail in other ways, right? So case in point, Tyseer Denmark reopened his recruitment, chose to back off his pledge to Oregon. This comes on the heels of a visit to Penn State. I don't know how the timing of all this lined up, if it was during his Penn State visit, after his Penn State visit, before his Penn State visit. I'm honestly not sure. But we do know that he visited Penn State this weekend. And, you got to view the Nittany Lions as the front runner in this recruitment, seeing that he is an in-state guy from Philadelphia. So James Franklin and that staff do a pretty good job of keeping the top talent home in the state of Pennsylvania. What do we know about Tyseer Denmark? I mean, really crafty guy, 5'11", 180. I think I really liked this pickup at the time of his commitment back around the Thanksgiving time of last year in November. He was the first wide receiver commitment for the Ducks in the 2024 class. But before he made that commitment to Oregon, he announced the top three of Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. And then that kind of just goes to show you why Penn State should be viewed as the leader now for a flip, seeing that they just hosted him on a visit. And, this isn't all bad news for Oregon. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some really talented wide receivers that they're still pursuing here in the 2024 class. It's not the end of the world, but, it also makes some sense here because those cross-country commitments are hard to hang on to as time goes on. And as you get closer to, senior year, closer to signing, things always get more real for a recruit, for their family, for their coaches. Hey, you're about to go pack up your life and move all the way across the country to play your college football. I'm sure one way that Oregon gets negatively recruited all the time is the distance. Your family's not going to be able to see you play as often. I'm not saying that happened here, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least. So Tyseer Denmark decommits from Oregon. Now the question that everyone's going to be asking, well, Max, what's next? I'm going to tell you what's next. The Ducks still have a number of really talented receivers that they're recruiting here in the 2024 class. And one name, in my opinion, has to be at the very top of that list. And that is 2024 St. Louis, Missouri, Christian Brothers wide receiver, Jeremiah McClellan. Why Jeremiah McClellan? Well, it's because the timing lines up pretty nicely here. You get a little bit of not so great news, some stinger of a news, if you will, with Tyseer Denmark decommitting. But Jeremiah McClellan, he's coming to Eugene for his official visit with the Oregon football program next Saturday, that big June 23rd weekend. And he's one of the best of the best. If you don't know who Jeremiah McClellan is, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown here. I did just post a really good in-depth update over on Ducks Digest about Jeremiah McClellan. I got to see him at the OT7 championship tournament out in Huntington Beach. So, love getting my boots on the ground and getting on the road in the recruiting trail. He's rated a 4-star recruit, 0.9389 by the 247 Sports Composite, ranked the number 143 player nationally, number 20 wide receiver, and the number 4 recruit in the state of Missouri. He's 6 foot and he weighs 190 pounds. and he's one of the top uncommitted receivers in the country right now. If you're just looking, he has 43 reported scholarship offers, and this is a really, really talented wide receiver class. And now that Tyseer Denmark is no longer in the picture for Oregon, the Ducks have 3 wide receivers committed. You got Jordan Anderson out of Newport Harbor, you have Jack Wrestler out of Mater Dei, and you have Dylan Gresham out of San Jacinto. I've talked extensively about what I think about all of those guys on previous episodes, previous written work. So go check that out if you haven't. But, you got a couple other guys that we're still in the mix, that Oregon is still in the mix for in the 24 class. And I think Ryan Pelham has to be at the top of that list. And I'm going to tell you why. I think Oregon has an awesome chance here, but they're going to be going against some really, really tough competition if they want to get McClellan's commitment when it's all said and done. You have Oregon in the mix, and he has already taken official visits to LSU and Ohio State. If you're talking wide receiver talent, there may not be a better school at developing talent than Ohio State. Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes do an awesome job. There's no disputing that, which is why this is going to be a very tough battle for Oregon to win. But I think there's reason to be optimistic that they can make something happen. If you're looking at the timing of this official visit for Jeremiah McClellan, he's coming in to what is expected to be his last official visit. Mizzou is also in the picture, Eli Drinkwitz, and the Tigers are staying in the mix here for the top in-state the top in-state wide receiver. Eli Drinkwitz is staying in the mix. So, I think it's he said, McClellan told me that he could see himself getting back out to Missouri for another visit, an unofficial visit, but doesn't have a commitment timeline right now. Is kind of just waiting for his mom to pick a date. But his mom, his brothers, and his dad are going to be making it out to Eugene with him for that official visit. So I think Jeremiah McClellan, I saw him play with California Power at the OT7 championship and that guy championship tournament. That guy is nice. He's real nice. I think that when you're looking at the other receivers that Oregon is still in the mix for, I think a couple other names. I'm a little rusty here. It's been like 5 or 6 days since I did a podcast, so words are a little tough. But the other wide receivers that Oregon's in the mix for, you got Ryan Pelham out of Long Beach Millikan. He just took his official visit to USC this weekend. He's going to be on campus at the same time as Jeremiah McClellan is, I believe, for his official visit with the Ducks. That's a last name. Don Pelham, he coached at Oregon, coached the linebackers there for a number of years. There's some good family ties there. I think that Oregon has a chance there. He just announced the top 2 of USC and Oregon. I think right now I'm leaning towards USC for Ryan Pelham. He's super crafty, but I think the key difference between Pelham and McClellan is their physical build. I think that McClellan has probably a good 15 pounds on Pelham. I've seen Pelham play in person a lot. He's really shifty, really crafty, amazing playmaker. But I think if you're asking me to choose between one of those guys, I think Jeremiah McClellan gets the slight edge for me as of right now. And he loves Junior Adams. They have a super strong relationship. Dan Lanning's from the state of Missouri, so that might give them a little bit more of an edge with the McClellan family. Playing for a head coach that is from your home state, knows the culture in the state, knows what life is like in the state. And I think that this is a guy, Jeremiah McClellan, that you could see Dan Lanning try to come in the mix for and close the deal, seal the deal, because Oregon needs wide receivers. With Troy Franklin heading to the league after this next year, you never know what's going to happen. I think that Jeremiah McClellan is a guy that they go all in on. Also worth noting that Gatlin Bear is another talented wide receiver the Ducks are going after here in the 2024 class. He was just in town for his official visit out of Burley Senior High School in Burley, Idaho. Number 44 prospect in the nation, the number 10 wide receiver, and the number 1 player in Idaho, according to the 247 Sports composite. He's going to be heading to Michigan June 23rd, according to the 247 Sports. And I think that Michigan is the team that I've heard the most consistent buzz about for Gatlin Bear. But maybe with Tyseer Denmark no longer in the mix, that could free up a little bit of playing time or some space there for Gatlin Bear. I've heard a little bit about him possibly taking a mission trip after his high school days wrap up. So you got to think about how that could potentially impact numbers and, him ultimately getting to Oregon at a later time than these other wide receivers. Also, Terry Bussey is a guy to watch out for. I need to do a little bit of digging and see if he's still expected to make it out. He's a top athlete in the state of Texas in the 2024 class, and I've talked repeatedly about how important Texas is going to be for Oregon in this 2024 class. Looking at Justin Williams, the top linebacker target for Oregon in the 2024 class. He was just on campus for his official visit. You had Nate Frazier from Mater Dei, who was on campus for his official visit. The Ducks are really fighting tooth and nail with Georgia in that one. Alabama is also in the mix, but I think it's really going to come down to Oregon and Georgia for Nate Frazier. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now when you're looking at wide receiver news and kind of what else that you need to keep track of for Oregon here in this current recruiting cycle. Kamar Matuti's coming into town for his official visit next weekend. I've had my pick on Oregon for a long time. Just posted an update there on Ducks Digest from Kamar Matuti. I got to see him at the Elite 11 in person. Love the way that guy moves. He's up to 230. Just a freak athlete, kind of a guy that the Ducks would love to have at linebacker. He took his official visit to Washington this past weekend, and then that Oregon official visit is the last one that he's going to take. And then from there, he shifts into decision mode as the Ducks await to hear the decision from one of their top linebacker targets coming out of Southern California. So, Ducks have a top 10 class. That's right where you want to be. But at the end of the day, they want to get to that top 5 ranking. I think that's very well within reach here, especially with the group that they have in the fold. Elijah Rushing just took his official visit this past week, 5-star edge rusher out of the state of Arizona. So things are looking good for the Ducks. And I think there's another 5-star visitor that's going to pop up for a visit, an unofficial visit in the near future. So I don't want to tease too much, but keep an eye out for another 5-star that's going to be making his way out to Oregon for an unofficial visit in the 2024 class, I might add. That's all I'm going to say. But we're winding down here on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Appreciate you guys for being along. Make sure you lock in with me on all social media platforms. I'm at Torres Sports on Twitter and Instagram. And then you guys also have to stay locked in on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future episodes. And then also check out my written work over on ducksdigest.com. Share the show with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. But with all that in the books, appreciate you guys tuning in and being along for another episode of the podcast. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.